After the brutal and bloody executions, the animals remember the sixth commandment and visit the barn to read what it says. Painted on the side of the barn are the words, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause." The animals assume that the two words at the end had slipped from their memory. The animals' lives continue to grow more miserable, and it often seems that they're worse off than when Farmer Jones ran the farm. Squealer steps in and convinces them otherwise. On Sunday morning, Squealer, holding a long strip of paper with his trotter, would read out to them lists of figures proving that the production of every class of foodstuff had increased by 200%, 300%, or 500%, as the case might be. The animals saw no reason to disbelieve him, especially as they could no longer remember very clearly what conditions had been like before the rebellion. The poet Minimus writes a poem called Comrade Napoleon, and Napoleon is praised for all of the good things that happen on the farm. Moorhens are executed after confessing that they were in league with Snowball. Rumours start to spread that animals are tortured and starved at Pinchfield. Moreover, terrible stories were leaking out from Pinchfield about the cruelties that Frederick practised upon his animals. He had flogged an old horse to death. He starved his cows. He had killed a dog by throwing it into the furnace. He amused himself in the evenings by making cocks fight with splinters of razor blade tied to their spurs. These rumours compel the animals to side with Napoleon despite the increasingly miserable conditions that they're living in. The windmill is completed but eventually destroyed when Frederick and his men invade the farm. Although the animals are dispirited by the Battle of Windmill, Squealer soon whips them into a patriotic frenzy with songs and ceremonies. 2 whole days were given over to celebrations. There were songs, speeches, and more firing of the gun, and a special gift of an apple was bestowed on every animal, with 2 ounces of corn for each bird and 3 biscuits for each dog. It was announced that the battle would be called the Battle of Windmill, and that Napoleon had created a new decoration, the Order of the Green Banner, which he'd conferred upon himself. At the end of the chapter, Napoleon suffers a hangover after the pigs discover a case of whiskey in the farmhouse. The animals are shocked to hear that he's feeling unwell and are further dismayed when he orders books on brewing, and that the small paddock behind the orchard set aside for the older animals is sown with barley. The chapter ends with the animals discovering another change to the 7 commandments. No animal shall drink alcohol to excess. In this chapter, the pigs continue to change the tenets of animalism to suit their own needs and continue to manipulate and exploit the other animals who gradually start to realise that their lives are no different to the days of Farmer Jones. Dictators often give themselves grand military titles. Military dictator of Uganda, Idi Amin, for example, adopted the title His Excellency President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji, Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and the fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire and Africa in general, and Uganda in particular. In Animal Farm, Napoleon insists that he's referred to in a formal style as our leader, Comrade Napoleon. The pigs on the farm also call Napoleon by other names, including Father of all animals, Terror of mankind, Protector of the sheepfold, and Duckling's friend. The propaganda in dictatorships often praises the leader, creating what's known as a cult of personality, in which the leader develops an almost godlike reputation. The poem that Minimus writes is inscribed on the barn next to the 7 commandments. Squealer also paints a portrait of Comrade Napoleon. These types of images are frequently used in dictatorships to create the impression that the leader is extremely powerful. The pigs convince the other animals that their defeat at the Battle of Windmill is a victory. As this chapter closes, the pigs continue to take more and more for themselves and continue to erode the tenets of animalism by surreptitiously changing the 5th commandment to "No animal shall drink alcohol to excess." These changes illustrate Orwell's disillusionment with the revolution that occurred in Russia and the way the country quickly descended into totalitarianism, corrupting the vision of a society of free and equal human beings. This chapter also touches on the idea of perpetual war and how ongoing war can help to solidify support for the ruling government. Political activist Noam Chomsky argues that a state of perpetual war promotes the interests of the dominant political and economic classes. In Animal Farm, the perpetual fighting with other farms seems to galvanise support for the pigs. This idea of perpetual war is one that Orwell developed further in 1984 when he wrote, "The war is waged by each ruling group against its own subjects, and the object of the war is not to make or prevent conquests of territory, but to keep the structure of society intact." In this sense, war is just another tool of oppression. We're going to have a little bit more of a casual chat about Chapter 8. You will need a pen, a highlighter to mark those important passages, those important quotes, and also to jot down your observations about this chapter in a copy of the text, so that when you come to do some writing or talking or thinking about it later on, you've got a really good starting point. To start off with, in addition to the continued erosion of those key beliefs of animalism, the modification of the commandment to read, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause," we have the development of this cult of personality around Napoleon. What we've seen in the previous chapters is the gradual erosion of democracy. So the pigs initially removing the Sunday meetings, Napoleon executing his political rivals, and what starts to develop in this chapter is that kind of cult of personality around Napoleon. They start to create the impression that he's more than just another animal, that he's kind of godlike. And just kind of towards the beginning of this chapter, there's that acknowledgement that he's rarely seen in public. He lives apart from the other animals. And when he does appear, he has this black cockerel who basically lets out a large fanfare before he speaks. And in addition to that, the gun is fired off every year on Napoleon's birthday. And once again, he has all of these military decorations and kind of extravagant titles in the style of every tin pot dictator who has ever existed. And of course, the poet Minimus composes the poem Comrade Napoleon, which is inscribed on the side of the barn. Friend of the fatherless, fountain of happiness, lord of the swill bucket. Oh, it makes me want to vomit. Once again, it creates the impression that Napoleon is more than just another animal, that he is almost godlike. And that's what the cult of personality is about. It's about creating that impression about a leader. And of course, at the beginning of this chapter, just going back, there's an acknowledgement again that the animals are working harder and they're working longer and they're no better fed than they were in Jones's day. So I've underlined that. It seems like every one of the last few chapters has begun with an acknowledgement that life is getting worse for the animals. And of course, Napoleon gets a portrait in profile executed by Squealer in white paint on the side of the barn. Nothing says strong authoritarian leader more than a large portrait. And of course, Frederick and his men come along and destroy the windmill. There's a very fierce battle. And Boxer can see that it's not such a tremendous victory, but Squealer basically convinces the animals that it was. And lo and behold, Napoleon creates a new decoration, the Order of the Green Banner, which he had conferred upon himself. And of course, at the end of this chapter, the pigs find a case of whiskey and then end up feeling pretty poorly about themselves. And in what is a great tragedy, that field that was supposed to be put aside for the older animals is sown with barley, and they start to manufacture their own alcohol. And of course, they change yet another commandment. And on that depressing note, let's do some writing. For this chapter, I want you to respond to the following topic. A cult of personality is constructed around Napoleon, which helps to solidify his power. Do you agree? Start off with a topic sentence that explains your stance on the topic. What is a cult of personality and how does it apply to Napoleon? Explain the way the pigs create the impression that Napoleon is more than just another animal. Along the way, use short quotations from this chapter and sentences of your own to support the discussion, and close off the paragraph with a link back to the topic. That's it for Chapter 8. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I'll catch you next time.